Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be using Grafana to display information about servers or workstations that we have in our infrastructure. And to do that, we're going to be using what's called a stack. And a stack is, in system admin like lingo, a product stack, if you marketing guys, are out there. It is a stack or a collection of software that we use to, as a means to an end, a specific functionality. In this case, we're going to be using the TIG stack, which is Telegraf, InfluxDB, and Grafana. And what these softwares are going to allow us to do is collect information about systems that we can display in a human-readable manner. So to start off, we should probably describe what those softwares are. Telegraf is a piece of software that runs as an agent on the machine, and this piece of software collects information about that unit, be it network throughput or CPU usage, and it sends that information to a time series database. So in that time series database that we're using in this particular stack is Influx. InfluxDB logs and records all of this information that it gets from Telegraf from those machines. And then we finally utilize Grafana. And Grafana is the actual web UI, the front end, the part that we actually see that takes all the information from Influx and parses it into something that, we can see and understand. So to get started, what we have here is, our lab server. We're just going to jump right into Hyper-V here. And I have set up a Grafana server and our file server. Now both of these are fresh installs and none of the software has been installed, so I'm going to walk you through how to install the software and configure it and finally get something set up. So let's go ahead and boot these up here. We're going to start with our Grafana server. And the only thing I've done to our Grafana server thus far is make sure that it has a static IP address. So I'm going to be cheating a little bit during this, and I'm going to be copying some commands off of Notepad that I have on a separate screen here, and that's really just because I'm not going. It's by the time you watch this, the versions and the URLs that I'm going to be using may be different. But don't worry, I'm going to be obviously posting links to everything that I'm using down in the description below. So to make this a little bit easier, what I'm going to be doing is logging in via PuTTY, because PuTTY is going to allow me to use right clicks instead of the actual Hyper-V window. So we're going to go ahead and log into our Ubuntu server, which is what Grafana is going to end up running on. We're going to use our default super secure password. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that everything's up to date before we start. So we're going to sudo apt update, because this is a Debian-based system. And then we're going to want to make sure everything's up to date, but we would want to make sure that everything is actually, all those updates are installed, so we would hit upgrade. Good. So, now, what stage would we do this in? Well, we don't want to install the agent because it's not going to be able to send any data anywhere. And we're not going to want to install Grafana because there's nothing for it to attach to. So first things first, let's install Influx. So to install Influx, we are going to download the package off of the website, which I happen to have in my handy dandy notebook. So let's do sudo, and then we will download all of this. Perfect. And then after you download the deb, you're going to want to install it using dpackage. So now we will do that to install our database. Now after our database is installed, we downloaded it and then we installed it. So now we actually want to start the service so that we can interact with it. So we will go ahead and sudo service InfluxDB start. No errors, so we should be good to go. Now, we want to enter Influx, because while we have the database software there, there's no actual databases. So there's nothing, Influx is literally doing nothing, it's just a shell. So let's enter Influx and set up some information for it. And we will do that by typing influx to bring us to an influx shell, as we can see here. And then what we're going to do is we need to create somewhere for the data to go. So we need to create a database, and then we need to name the database something that we easily recognize. Generally, depending on what you're monitoring, you might want a different database for it, or you might want a different database per machine. So in this case, we have a fake file server in Hyper-V that we're going to set up here in just a little bit. So we're going to want to name this database probably FileServe. So let's go ahead and create database file SRV. I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. Perfect. Now let's just make sure that that like actually went right. Show databases. And right there, we have FileServe. Perfect. So we want to exit this because we don't want to play around in Influx anymore. And we're back at our primary prompt. Now, what we need to do is, that's literally all there is to it. I mean, that took probably less than 5 minutes, and you're probably wondering how that was a core part in, what we're doing here. There are other things you can do with Influx. You could set like database, like, usernames and passwords and encrypt it and things like that. I'm just going to show you like some super basic, standard up kind of things. I do want you aware that you can set up a little bit better, security on this kind of thing. But I'm just not going to walk you through that today because I want you up and running and looking at this stuff as fast as humanly possible. And, once you understand the fundamentals and once you can actually get it to work, then I believe, that's a good time for you to make, modifications and, move on to more complicated things like making encrypted databases or password protected databases and things like that. Because it's, my belief that once you understand the core, components, like the core, the fundamentals of how like something works, then it's easier for you to, get it up and running. It wouldn't do much good if, I taught you how to do, all of the advanced stuff in a basic walkthrough, which isn't the goal of this channel anyway. But and then something broke. What if you broke something, or what if you didn't remember? You wouldn't know how to backtrack. You wouldn't know what you did wrong. So only vanilla stuff. So we do have that. Enough of me talking. We have Influx installed. Yes, it takes less than 5 minutes. Now we installing Grafana. Grafana is going to sit on top of Influx and talk to it, and that's what we're going to want. So the first thing we're going to do is, just like Influx, we need to download it, we need to install it, and then we need to start it. So pretty simple. So let's start that with grabbing the latest version of Grafana, which as of this is 6.2. And now that that's done, we are going to go ahead and install that file. And no, some of this stuff, between Influx and Grafana, I mean, you don't need a ton of space. I mean, these aren't large programs we're talking about here. So Grafana is going to go ahead and start installing. So once this is done, the next thing, oh no, we broke it. Alright, so let's try this again. Alright, so the reality is I had enough time, enough of embarrassing myself. I actually did try for, another like minute or so, but after a couple commands, I realized that it really just did slip my mind. So here's us segueing back into it and like me trying to install this, but I did make a mistake, so I haven't actually fixed the problem. I'm just going to show you how to fix the problem, because if you make the problem, you need to know how to fix it. So let's go ahead and install our Grafana package after we downloaded it here. And we're going to enter our super secret password that I use for our lab server. And obviously you can see Grafana is already installed. So it's going to take a minute to do that here. and then we're going to try and start our service. But first, we have our problem. So we have an issue starting Grafana because we need libfontconfig1, which isn't installed. So what we're going to do is we're going to install the dependencies for packages that we already have installed. So we'll do sudo apt get install f, and this should say, hey, you need libfontconfig1 because you have packages installed that like need it, dude. Yes, please install them. And now if I remember right, after this I should be able to just start the service, or do I need to reinstall the package? We'll try and start the service. Yes. Alright, so the service has been started, and we have Grafana installed, and we have our dependencies, and I'm only a little bit embarrassed. So, perfect. Now, we can exit our Grafana server. That's it. The Grafana server only needs Influx database, and it only needs Grafana itself. Now, if we want, we can take a quick look here, and we will go to 192.168.1.3, and the default port for Grafana is 3000. There is a way to change it to port 80. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I will also link that in the description. So I believe 3000 is the default, and it is. Perfect. So our Grafana is stood up. We can see it. Everything's good. So now what we need to do is log into it, and we're going to be setting up our data sources. So let's try administrator, and we'll use our super secret password. Oh wait, it's probably admin because this is Grafana's default install. We haven't done anything yet. There we go. Now we'll enter our super secret password. Alright, so admin. So we can add a data source, new dashboard, add users, and the plugin explorer. It pretty much walks you through everything, but we'll go ahead and do it step by step for you. So we're at our home dashboard, which is what happens when you log in, and we're going to add a data source. And our data source type is Influx. So we're going to click on that. And we're going to leave this actually as localhost 8086. And our database name, if you remember, is file srv. And our user is going to be our Grafana username and password, or the database password had you set one. So we will do admin, and then our super secret password. And now we're going to call this file server, just so we can pick it from the list. Guess I have to do this all again once I change the name, but that's okay. Now we're going to hit save and test at the bottom, and we should get green, means go. We can talk to it. And it does. Data source is working, and data source updated that you can see up there. So that's good. Now we'll go back to home, which is, the little, or just hit back. But we'll go home here, home dashboard, new dashboard, and we're just going to kind of exit this because I don't really want to do that necessarily right now. So we're going to save this dashboard, and we are going to call this, I don't know, lab. Whoops. If I learn how to use my keyboard here, lab. Perfect. So we have a lab dashboard, totally blank, and now we need data coming into it. So let's minimize that. Go ahead and exit PuTTY. We are done in here, and we want to load up our actual file server. So let's go ahead and connect to it and start. And we're going to go ahead and maximize this. And we'll use our super secret password again. Perfect. So I've already actually taken the opportunity to package Telegraf. Telegraf comes, actually I'll show you really quick. Best to walk you through it. Telegraf comes with Telegraf and the configuration file. I have a little text document that I added in, which is the command, which I'll be showing you shortly. And we need to modify the configuration file to go where we want it to. And I've already done that, so I'm going to show you that here, just so you get an idea. Now, the configuration file for Telegraf is a bit of a bear. You know, if you look at it, there's a lot going on. Oh my God, what do I do? The only things for this that you're going to need to concern yourself with are what is the database name I need to send data to and what IP address is that database located at. Now, that is down over here in the first section called outputs. So as you can see here, our URL, I have uncommented it and added our IP address of our Grafana server, which is currently running. And then under database, I uncommented that and I typed file serve, which is the database that I want everything written to. So now that that's done, our configuration is complete for now. And I am going to go ahead and copy this over to our file server. Now note that I haven't made any other modifications to the configuration file for Telegraf. This is it. All I did was tell it the IP address and tell it the database that it needs to connect to. Actually, that's a little bit of a lie. I take that back. I did change the log output location because if there is an error, I do want to know about it. Alright, so we've extracted it and we are ready to get this server, our file server here, sending information. I like to bury Telegraf inside of the program files folder because I don't like it just hanging out. So I'm going to go ahead and move that really quick. We're just going to get her out of the way. Perfect. And then this brings me to the little command file that I made, where I literally just type, you know, the information that is needed for Telegraf to install as a service on the computer. So the first thing we need to do is, if I'm going to be telling Telegraf to do things, is we need to copy the current location. So just click on the bar up here and we're going to grab our directory and we're just going to go into command. And we're going to go ahead and open that as admin. And we're going to cd to this folder so that we can talk to Telegraf. Now I already pasted this out, so I'm telling Telegraf to install as a service and use the config file that is right here, which is, you know, where it's installed to. So we're going to go ahead and copy this. And we're going to paste this in the command prompt. And we should get back no errors. Perfect. So, what did we learn with Influx and Grafana is that once something's installed, we have to start it. So, let's go to Task Manager. And we're going to go over to the Services tab after we expand it. And we're going to go find Telegraf. So, Telegraf is right here and it's not started, so let's go ahead and right click and hit start. And this is where the log file location setting comes in useful, because now Telegraf is telling us if things go wrong. So let's go ahead and open that. Loaded outputs, Influx database, everything here seems fine so far. Good, so no errors as of yet. Now, we'll go ahead and minimize that. Perfect. So now let's actually set up some counters. The first one I'm going to show you is we're going to go ahead and set up a CPU counter, so that we can monitor the CPU usage of our file server. So let's go back to our browser over here, and we are going to click on, let's see, add panel, and we are going to let's see, add query or visualization. We'll go ahead and add a query first. So now, to get CPU, I'm just going to kind of run through this. This is the hardest part of setting up Grafana, to be completely honest with you. You need to kind of, sort of speak databases. I don't. I'm not a database guy at all. But I'll run you through some very basic configs. Sometimes the data that Telegraf is sending, makes it really readable, so you kind of know what's going on already. And otherwise, there is a site on Grafana, I believe, where you can download other people's templates. Like they can upload their templates, with the settings and stuff that they use, and then you can download it, tweak it to work in your environment. And obviously, I will be including that in the description. So what we're going to do is we're going to say default. And we are going to say win CPU, because we want to measure the CPU of our file server, which is on Windows. So you kind of see where I'm going here. And all of this is data that it's reading from the database. So it kind of helps you along. And so we're going to say we want to read win CPU. And we are going to do field. Our field is going to be, let's see here, processor time. And you can see we're already getting a blip of data. Good. So let's see if we can do time interval fill null, and it's a time series. That's fine. I'm kind of cheating because I'm looking over at a pre-config that I've already done. And then the naming pattern is just going to be, let's just do, what is it? Let's do tag host. That should give us our name. Yes. Alright, cool. So we already have some data here. Now we got to make it pretty, right? So in order to make it pretty, we're going to go to the visualization column, or a visualization like pip on the column on the left. And we don't want it to be in graph view, right? Graph view is difficult to figure out what we're looking at. All right, so we're measuring CPU usage, and the way that we generally think of CPU usage is a percentage between 0 and 100. So we're going to modify how this data is given to us visually so that we can make a little bit more sense of it. And in order to do that, we're going to change this to single stat, or we can do gauge. I think I have it on single stat, yeah. Yeah, gauge, we'll do gauge. That's fun. All right, so we have gauge, and then we want to, let's see, maximum, mean, current value. Let's try this first. We'll do current. So current is 0.046. Okay. Value. So we want the current stat. We want to know what the CPU usage is right now. And then the unit is, we are going to want to do percent. So that is under percent, I believe. Which is a, so I'm still trying to figure this out here. I mean, not figure it out, I just don't know exactly where it is. So yes, miscellaneous percent 0 through 100. And then background, no. Value, yes. We want the thresholds to be 50 and 80, I guess. Because, we have different colors that we can associate with it. So, 50% would be yellow, and then at 80% CPU usage, it's going to turn red, because it's going to be oh no, that's not, that's not good. So, and then gauge, we're going to show a gauge, which enables the actual gauge. And now we can see what our CPU usage is, and it's a little bit easier. So set value mappings, we'll set the value mappings at 0 through 100% again. And you don't necessarily need to touch this, but if you know what it means, go ahead and touch it. Some data isn't going to be the same, you know what I mean? It really depends on, you know, what you're touching here, because you can set a % 0 through 100, but you know, you could be using like a virtual like CPU cluster, you know, where you know that measurement is a little off. It doesn't really necessarily make sense. So that's really the difficult part about, you know, Grafana in knowing databases and stuff, is that you kind of need to know enough to know how you want to display information, or the best way to display information, in order for it to really work right. But enough of me babbling. This isn't really that scary. We already have CPU usage. Let's go back over here, and it's already set to default, but we'll do file server. So now that we're on file server, we are getting 4%. Good. We're going to go up here and we're going to edit this, because I think, well, let me take a look here. Panel title, I don't want it to be panel title, but I don't actually know exactly how. There we go. So panel title, and we're going to say file server CPU. Yes. All right, perfect. So now we will go back to the lab, and we have our file server CPU usage, right? Kind of neat. Now, what we can do though is we can do even more neat things. So, first of all, let's what can we do here? Telegraf is working perfectly, so we can close all of this. What if we measured the throughput of the drive, like the read-write? That might be neat. So that one will also be under file server, because everything from the file server is going to go to that database, but this time we're selecting a different part of it, right? So we are going to measure drive C's throughput. Why not? So we are going to select a measurement, and we're going to do WinDisk IO, and where the instance, right? The instance is going to be C, right? The C drive, drive 0, C. And we're going to select that. And then our field value is we're going to do the read bytes per second. And then, so we've already got some data, so it kind of knows what we're talking about. But this whole like 30 million thing, we don't know what that means yet. We have to break that down. So let's just make sure that the rest of this is good. And since this is read, right, we're going to name this one disk read. Now, what if we want the read and write to both happen on the same graph, right? What if we want to see, you know, multiples? Well, we can. Let's do add query. And now we have a whole other field. So now we will do select measurement, and we're going to do disk IO again, and then we're going to select the C drive again, and then our field value for this is going to be field write bytes per second. Alright, so now we have two measurements, and you can see another little yellow line happening over here. Perfect. And we're going to name disk right. Good. Okay, so we've done that. Let's go ahead and save for now. And then we want to make this, we want to try and like visually make this, not whatever this is. So we'll leave it, we'll go ahead and leave it lines, but what we need to do here is make this so that the scaling is much better, right? We have 40 million way up here, and we don't know anything about what that means. So now we need to go to visualization, and then in visualization, over here, disk read and disk write, we need to change the scaling and what this actual data means, because Influx is just getting a bunch of numbers and Grafana is reading a bunch of numbers, but it doesn't really know what to do. So down here under axes, we need to change this to information that will make this far more readable. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40 million, and when we look at it, so we'll do unit, and then we need to actually change the unit here to bytes, so it will be data rate, and I believe it is bytes a second in this case. And that magically changes from 10, 20, 30, 40 megabytes a second, which is already a million times more readable, and thankfully all we really need. So we have disk read, disk write, and now we have a scale that actually makes a ton of sense, because now if we mouse over this little green blip that happened, the disk read was 31.47 megabytes a second with a write of 346 kilobytes a second. So now we'll go ahead and save it again, and we'll head back to our lab. So now we'll go ahead and drag this around, because you can do that. Now that's it, you're done. I mean, realistically, there's a lot more you can do with this, but we've done CPU and data on a Windows machine. And if you want, what we can actually do here is there's neat little customizations you can make. Like if you let's go to, what is it, preferences, I think it is. We'll go to preferences. Yeah, we'll go ahead and save it, because I moved the panes and it knows that. So the UI theme, we can select light, for example. And now if we go back to our dashboard here, lab, everything's white. But say I don't like those colors, right? Like green and yellow look absolutely terrible. We just click on like little bars, and we can actually select our colors. We can make custom, or we can just select it. So we'll do I don't know, blue for reads, and for writes we can do purple, and that'll look much nicer here. Right, so now in our VM, if we do something, let's exit this here. In our VM, we could do something crazy like, I don't know, let's try and let's check for Windows updates or something, right? That should get us some activity. I'm sure it has quite a few. And then we'll actually be able to see that change happen on the actual Grafana server here. So with checking for Windows updates, we should be getting we're downloading quite a bit. So we've had some reads to find out what ones we need, and writes. So this should all start spiking up here. And you can actually also choose, there are some options up here as far as, the view modes, or we can select, we can adjust the scale of like these actual graphs. So right now we have from 10:30 this morning to right now, and we can actually change that to, we'll say, the last 5 minutes, right? And now that's drastically changing the way this looks. As you can see, since we're doing Windows updates, our CPU usage has gone up dramatically. And let's see if we can just turn this into something like a little more readable, because we have like specs right here, but we want maybe we can get some lines. Let's see. Well, we can select average. That's probably far more useful. Draw modes, lines, portraits, bars. I mean, we definitely want lines. Let's see if we can rewrite it. No? So I'm just kind of checking what I've actually already set up here. You know what it is? it's actually too short of a distance. I did like the last 5 minutes, but the reality is that my test is like the last hour, which is, yeah, right. So we should be able to see this here. Start giving us tons of data. Let's see what the CPU looks like. Great. And then we should be able to see that in this. It's installing. It's definitely working. Yeah, I mean, it's working. It's working pretty hard. So, and this is all based off of information that Windows is actually feeding it. Like, these are the performance counters. It's not WMIC, although you can use WMIC. This is not WMIC. It's using the actual like Windows performance counters. So, we're getting, this is a direct feed from like what Windows is saying is actually happening and going on with the machine. And therefore, pretty accurate as far as like the data is concerned. At least, and even if it isn't necessarily super accurate, I mean, there are, any database guy will tell you there are like odd idiosyncrasies that happen when, you're like, say you pull in less than 1 minute intervals. If you pull in less than 1 minute intervals, that's really bad. You should generally pull in 5 minute, I believe. And it really depends on the database, but it also depends on how much information on the system is actually changing too. There's a lot that goes behind it. That's more of like a deep dive into like database management and stuff like that, and like proper procedures. Not that I'm the person that can do that. I'm not a database guy myself, but I do know that like weird things definitely start to happen when you get into things like that. But this is sorry, my throat's like sore. This is pretty basic. In this video, you've set up Telegraf on the system. You've set up Telegraf on a system. You've installed Influx. You've installed Grafana. You've set those up, and you've logged into it. And then we even did a CPU graph and a data graph so that you can measure like throughput. And you're on your way. From there you can set up things like alerts that send alerts to your email. They can set, you can do crazy things. Like you could have like, say, I'm sure you know what Slack is. If you don't, it's basically Discord if you're a gamer guy that kind of just think home labs are neat. But, you could set up like a webhook in Slack for like an email address, and then you could have Grafana send alert data to that email address, and then it posts in the channel in Slack that you have the webhook go to. So, you can have like an alerts channel. And, that's just like super nifty stuff. You can do a lot of cool things with Grafana. And, this whole, it just grows and grows and grows. It becomes big. It's a great tool to have like a 30,000 foot view of, what your machines are doing, what your operating systems are doing, how your hardware is doing. And a lot of people use it for a lot of different things. I mean, there are tons of examples if you go out there and look for like Grafana examples, or check some of the links that I leave below for Grafana examples. I mean, you have people that have home automation stuff tied into it. I think there's like a product out there right now that actually hooks into the mains of like your fuse box, so like people can see like their power draw. They know how much like their refrigerator draws. I mean, like the world's your oyster as far as it's concerned. Setting up graphing and like alerting tools. This is it. When you think of the dashboard that engineers and stuff go to make sure everything's running right, like you can literally make your own like what is happening infrastructure in your house, on your lab PC, on your lab computer, on your core infrastructure if you want, and it's not super difficult. If you want to do and not super difficult doesn't mean it's limited. If you want to do like crazy advanced stuff, you saw a little bit of it. I mean, there's a lot you can touch. And it's a database software. I know that if you're doing certain calculations, you can actually put arithmetic, like actual math, inside of the query itself so that it spits out a number that you might be more used to. Really cool. You should definitely check it out. Otherwise, I hope that this was educational and that you learned something from it. And more importantly, I hope that in teaching you the basics, you are less scared of this stuff and you give it a shot. Let me know what you think in the comments, and otherwise, have a great day.